Hi, thank you to all of you for joining us on day 2 of NDTV World Summit, and I welcome all my guests on stage as well. Now, there is a growing movement towards sustainable living with people not just making environmentally conscious decisions, but with companies also investing in sustainable growth. In this session, we'll focus on environmental, social, and governance framework, also better known as ESG, where companies, in fact, are focusing on this, and we'll explore the vital intersection of profit and purpose. As India aims to become a $5 trillion economy, embedding ESG into its core business models is one of the essential steps for companies to drive long-term profitability and sustainable growth. ESG principles are no longer buzzwords, but they represent a transformative approach to business that can drive long-term value. Our esteemed panelists bring a wealth of experience from various sectors to this discussion. I am joined by Gagandeep Sethi, Senior Vice President, Integrated Operations and Sustainability and Responsibility for Pernod Ricard, India. Mustafa Wajid, co-founder of Billion, which is, of course, a clean mobility platform. And Mr. Ajay Pillai, Partner, Sustainability and Climate Change at Deloitte. Thank you all for joining us on this discussion. Starting with you, Mr. Sethi, what are some of the sustainability goals for Pernod Ricard, and how do you merge profitability with purpose, and how is ESG one of the foundational blocks when you do that?
Thank you, Tanima, and it's a pleasure to be part of this panel. For Pernod Ricard, globally, we have a very comprehensive ESG program under the umbrella name, what we call as Good Times from a Good Place. It is super aligned to the ESG principles and the UN Sustainable Development Goals with its 4 elements, core elements of nurturing the terroir. Terroir is a French word, and what it means is the terrain, where the land, the Mother Earth, from where we draw all our resources. And we, being a company in the alcobev sector, it's grain to glass. So the starting point is the grain from the land. So everything that we do while consuming those resources, we have to ensure we restore back the balance of the earth. The second most important element is around circular making, right? So while we produce products which delight our customers and consumers, we do it in a sustainable manner, right? In terms of maintaining the circularity, end-to-end value chain, right from the beginning, that is our backend, which is our suppliers, to the entire processing, which happens in our manufacturing facilities, and then the downstream in terms of the customer and the consumer, right? So that's the second element. The third element is all around valuing people. And that's the social cause, again, aligned to the ESG principles, where diversity and inclusion is a big impetus. And we are fully committed in terms of increasing the inclusion of gender in our workforce as well. And so those are the elements. And what India draws out of those elements is the cascade effect, right? So whether it is carbon neutrality, we are a water-consuming product in terms of managing our water balance and hence our water targets. And also many steps that have been taken, which obviously will be alluded in the session for sure.
Right. Mr. Mustafa Wajid, if I can draw you into the conversation now, how is Billion merging ESG into its core business model?
Yeah, thank you for that. Ellarigu, namaskara. My name is Mustafa, I'm from Bangalore. At Billion Electric, the question that she's asking specifically is focused on reducing the consumption of petroleum products in transportation. When you look at the environment issues as well as energy security issues, the 2 big elephants in the room are fossil fuels which are used for generating electricity, and the other one, which is equally large, is fossil fuels that are used for transportation. Just to put a number on this, India consumes about close to 150 million metric tons of petrol and diesel for transportation. This is apart from other fuels that we consume. You can imagine the amount of emissions that are coming. You can imagine the value of the imports that are going to be driven by this consumption. And at Billion Electric, we are trying to address and hopefully will do a good job of it. We've already started deploying electric trucks and as an electric truck platform for logistics. So by bringing down the carbon emissions in the transportation sector, by the way, half of India's diesel consumption happens on the highways. And that's a very, very important thing to remember. So we are at it, and we believe that decarbonizing the transportation sector at one level is our corporate objective. And we will, the name billion actually means that we would like to do 1 billion kilometers of decarbonized transportation. Now, whether this billion comes in a year or in cumulatively over 2 years or maybe even hopefully in a month as we go forward, this is something that we will see. Just to mention one thing, India's transportation requirements have multiplied by 3 times in the last 10 years. It's normally assessed in what we call as ton kilometers. And if you see the government publicate reports on this, 10 years ago we were at 1 trillion ton kilometers. Last year we crossed 3. So it's growing faster than the GDP. And that's because of increased urbanization, increased, I would say, consumerism, and also the e-commerce sector is also contributing to it. So that's something that we need to remember. And at Billion E, we would like to see how to reduce not just the decarbonization, but also make this transportation more sustainable. Thank you.
Mr. Pillai, if I can have your point of view now. Of course, the companies are going to discuss further on how they ensure that they are following ESG principles when in their business models. But what are some of the challenges you have seen firms facing when following ESG, and does it differ across sectors?
The key challenges I can put up top 3 or 4 challenges that I feel that the companies face. Number one is the quality of data and availability of reliable data to report on ESG. It requires a proper process to be followed at the operational level to have good data which can be reported. So the quality of data is right now very dependent on how tedious you are with the processes that you have in place, and it is doubtful at many places. Number 2 is the awareness level and expertise within the system for ESG to know that what is exactly expected from them to actually go out and report in ESG. So there are not many senior leadership members who are tuned to or aware of sustainability to the extent that is required. I'm not saying it is like that for everybody, but there are efforts being done for that. So, and third is the intent. As long as you believe that ESG is one more thing to be done, and the intent does not come from the top management that we really believe in ESG and we are not doing it to show somebody, but we really want to imbibe it as part of our business model, it will always remain, a sideline effect. So the quality of ESG will always be a challenge. And when you say sector-wise, well, different sectors have different parameters. For an IT industry, maybe data breach is a social issue. For an automobile industry or somebody who is water intense, availability of water, social license to operate, that would be. So sector-wise, these parameters change, but if you have policies and procedures which are in place, that should be similar for most of them.
Right. We'll discuss further in terms of regulations and policies as well. But coming back to you, Mr. Sethi, how is Pernod Ricard India innovating its production processes in order to align further with the ESG goals?
Very important. Innovation has to be embraced, and we see it as a cornerstone as part of our endeavor to attain sustainable manufacturing practices. So it starts, there are various phases to it or elements to it. The first one is it starts with the design. Innovation to design the product, the service that is for the offering, right? And much work starts there. We've aligned our entire innovation process, the stage gate, in terms the right decisions around ESG happen at the right time, which is stage 0 and 1, and not after or post you've launched the product, right? So that's the starting point. And how we ensure our business decision making is entwined at that stage. Are we going for a product or a service which will address the sustainability part of our objectives, right? And then obviously many examples of that, right? And many of the industry firsts, right? In terms of you'll have to push the scale there, especially some of the initiatives that we've done right again from the back end. sustainable sourcing, right? In terms of our product is primarily ethanol, right? And ethanol can be sourced from various sources, and it can be manufactured in many ways. Some of them are very sustainable, many of them are not sustainable. But those smart choices and using technical innovation around those, switch of fuel from fossil fuels to biomass, which is more sustainable. Sourcing our primary packaging, secondary packaging materials like outer shipper cartons, which are FSC, Forest Stewardship Council certified, and touching almost 84% of our raw material is coming from that source. Those are the choices, and you innovate. Design to sustainable value. So degrammage, so primary packaging for us is glass bottles. It's one of the most sustainable, but it is highly intensive from energy standpoint when you manufacture glass. So the lower glass you use in your primary packaging is you're lowering the absolute energy consumption. Innovating in terms of reuse. Responsible consumption is obviously reducing the consumption, is also reusing as much you can reuse, right? So one big initiative, again, is around reuse of our bottles, which we call taking it back, the reverse logistics, washing them, bringing them to that impeccable quality, and reusing that. And for consumer, they won't be able to make out whether it is new or reused, right? So it has a huge, so that's also innovation of a sort. Green manufacturing, I mean, we've taken huge strides. One big switch from fossil fuels to biomass in our own facilities. Our group target on scope 1 and 2 reduction, which is carbon emission, which is due to burning of fuels in our own manufacturing facilities. Our group target is around 54% we have to achieve as per our SBT 2030. India is already sitting at 94%. So in many of these targets or objectives, we are leading the group because India is a huge volume, India is a huge consumption pool, and it has a huge impact and bearing on our group performance, right? So hence we are taking the lead in that aspect. Then using technology and innovation in our processes, right? Designing our processes the right way, so that we conserve the resources and we avoid wastages in the entire value stream. There we use technology also. So all our lines and our production processes are internet connected, IoT. They are connected, the consumptions are being monitored, then advanced tools of AI are being used to analyze how and where the losses are happening and how they can be prevented, right? So innovation in its all form is being used. And it is coming handy in terms of achieving the objectives that we have set for ourselves.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned AI as well. In fact, is that something that is being used more of late in terms of aligning your production processes with ESG?
Yeah. So the starting point to bring any improvement is to measure what is important, and there is more and more data, as Mr. Pillai called out. So much of data is getting produced. It is becoming difficult to manage and read through that data, right? So you have to connect your lines and your manufacturing operations, get the relevant data, but then there has to be a layer which then screens that data and converts that into information which is based on which some decision can be taken. And that's where AI comes in a big way. Also in terms of problem solving, it helps in a big way, right? So it is very useful.
A handy tool there. Mustafa Wajid, if we, let's talk about carbon market and monetization of ESG. Now, the government has said that carbon trading scheme will be effective by 2026. But how soon do you see it maturing in the country?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. We must remember that the legislation that was required to make this happen was passed only in December 22. It's less than 2 years ago. And this is a very big change. The vision of the government is to try and see how to create a carbon market like you have the stock market, to put it in simple terms. You must realize that the creation of the stock market took a hell of a lot of time. It's in our country, and digitalization, all that happened only recently in the last 2 decades. So I think carbon markets, the process is on, policies are being contemplated and drafted. So yes, I think we are optimistic that we will see it kicking off in 2026. But as is with our country, there will be a lot of diverse issues. So to get them straightened out will take some more time. We are after all a very vocal democracy, and we keep objecting to so many things. So this will also undergo that treatment. But the important thing there is that for the first time, India will open up the possibility of monetizing carbon credits. So, since this panel is headlined as aligning profit and purpose, by the way, I was just joking with everybody that that's a Bhagavad Gita topic actually. But we are trying to convert it into a commercial topic here. The reality is that carbon credits will come. It's not in the rear view mirror anymore. It's now ahead. It's looking at us in the face. There will be challenges, but good organizations who can understand this and change and adapt their processes. Like, for example, Gagan's team is doing, I think, a very good job of that. I think these will be the people who will generate these carbon credits. Because don't forget, there will always be a sector which will generate carbon debits. You cannot go away from it. For example, the steel industry, for example, the cement industry, and so on and so forth. So the reality is that there will be a very vibrant market. And there will be people wanting to buy carbon credits. I think a startling example of that was unfolded a few months ago when everybody realized that one of the biggest contributors to the Tesla bottom line in the US was carbon credits. Nobody had understood the implication of this earlier. But the reality is that Tesla sold carbon credits and the guys who bought them were his competitors. General Motors, Ford, etc., etc. So I think we are changing that process, and I'm very optimistic that now that the legislation part is over, now the hard work has started. There will be some speed breakers and some potholes. Our systems are known for that, but that's our strength actually. The diversity and the width of opinion. So the process is much better, and I take great inspiration from the fact that the National Stock Exchange, for example, went through similar problems. But today, I'm very proud to say, and I've talked about this to people in other countries, that we have one of the most advanced stock markets in the world, if not the most. It's okay, there are always people who will try to play the fool, but by and large, we have leapfrogged, and I think our stock market is far ahead of some very mature stock markets which have been around for a century. So the reality is that we can do the same with our carbon markets. It will happen. Timelines in India must be a little flexible when we are doing something as radical as this. We saw it in the telecom sector, we saw it in the stock exchange, and I'm sure we'll see it in the carbon thing. But on a very positive note, it will happen. It's not in the rear view mirror. And decarbonization and sustainability can be monetized in the future and can add to companies' bottom lines.
But you're not putting a timeline to it just yet.
Well, I've lost enough hair to not commit numbers on calendars, dates. And 2026 is what we are all committed to. I come from the electricity sector, and electricity is one of the biggest problem areas for carbon. And therefore, we are all working hard at it. We hope to start trials sometime towards probably the end of next year, even before 26. And in 26, the idea is to go mainstream. But mainstreaming means that regulators have to be put in place. For example, we have SEBI, which regulates the stock market. Now, the question is still to be answered as to who will regulate the carbon market. So these are questions that will need answers. They may need some more parliamentary interventions. So it's a process, so let's be optimistic and look forward to it.
All right. Mr. Pillai, touching upon what Mr. Wajid was also talking about, regulatory frameworks in the country which exist, and how does that impact ESG, and are you an advocate for more regulations needed for that sector?
See, so far there aren't many regulatory frameworks for ESG. Actually, only the BRSR, which is mandated by SEBI, requires the top 1,000 listed by market capital to go out and report for sustainability. So largely sustainability reporting or ESG reporting is voluntary, and there are too many frameworks to actually look at and report against. But the thing is that if we want to make it more compliant, or if you want people to be more pushing towards reporting, then there is a need for bringing in more people into the folds of reporting, and not just the top 1,000 listed. Even in the top 1,000 listed, many are still not very sure what they have to report. And what we have currently in terms of regulation in India is very limited. But that is not the only thing that is forcing people to report. Many of our companies or manufacturers are in the supply chain for Europe and other countries, And Europe has a well-defined, regulatory requirement and the subsidiaries operating in there, as well as if you have a bigger market, CSRD has come in Europe, and if you have a bigger market in Europe and, you fall as large business, then also you will have to report according to their regulations also. So whether we want the regulation or not, we will be required to comply with the global requirements in a global market. So I may not be a bigger advocate of regulatory requirements, but there is a little lead because we as Indians are not right now looking at ESG as something that is a part of business, but many of it is being reported because it has been mandated by SEBI, so we have to report. So there is a need where people voluntarily believe. There are big firms again, and there are a lot of big and small firms who are voluntarily reporting, and they are making a sincere effort also. I cannot paint everybody with the same brush, but I do see that there is a large majority still who have to wake up and see that ESG is required as part of, it's a global truth that, if you don't adopt it today, the entire supply chain, the markets, the lenders, the investors, everybody is going to push you towards that direction, and eventually you will have to adopt to that. So some amount of regulation, especially in the climate space and in the decarbonization space, is required. Yeah?
Right. And now I want to ask the question which probably, is one of the important challenges that companies face when it comes to following ESG or incorporating ESG in the business model. So in terms of costs or in terms of processes, what are some of the key changes that you've had to make for Pernod Ricard and Billion EE, and what are the hurdles that you've faced so far?
Interesting one. I think, first of all, it's more of a notion. It's a mindset. Personal experience has been that, to a large extent, the first few steps that we take in the ESG, it is profit neutral or, in fact, accretive, right? I mean, I'll just allude to some of the examples. Degrammage, right, of glass, degrammage of plastic, market bottle usage, sustainable switch of fuels. These are sustainable under the ESG principles, and hardly they come with a cost. And you improve your efficiencies, you reduce your losses, it's profit, right? I think till the tipping point comes wherein you've scratched the barrel, and I think there's a lot of opportunity which lies till we have reached that point. Once you reach that point is when that decision has to be taken, in terms of the investments, right? And I think those are some of the challenges which come. Some part of that challenge can be addressed when you are making fresher and newer investments. When you're talking of capital investments, you're augmenting capacities. Can we have ESG principles in the design stage itself? So at that time, it is incremental or marginal or no cost, but you have designed for sustainability from the word go. Re-engineering is where the larger investment would come in. And I think to the point Mr. Pillai mentioned, I think policy, support, capital investment, subsidies, but there's a lot to be done till that point. So we should not directly jump. So I'm not advocating that. It's basically, the advocacy is more around improve internally as much you can. And when the decision point comes, the policy support, regulatory support has to be there from an investment standpoint so that we take the right decisions in that direction.
Mr. Wajid, the same question to you. What are some of the challenges or hurdles you faced?
Yeah, at Billion E, our focus and aim on which we've been making significant progress is to integrate renewable energy, electric mobility, and leveraging AI in the process so that we make the transportation loop completely sustainable. We have been trying out several pilots in this regard, and hopefully we will demonstrate on certain routes or certain sectors the fact that we are using green electricity to run electric trucks and have a platform which is AI-based, which can keep track of the whole thing and ensure efficiency optimization. So by doing this, I think we will, in India, show the way to the world. Because we are blessed with a lot of huge resources when it comes to renewables. We also have a very large transportation requirement. Now the challenge is to integrate these two. This will require a lot of processes. Unfortunately, also requires a lot of engineering. It's a hard job. It's not easy to do. we are not, we are not blessed with the advantage of digital where the power, the amount of power you're handling is less. Here we're talking of hundreds and thousands of megawatt of electricity. And this requires physical infrastructure to enable that. And if you're able to kind of get that loop going, we have done it in some cases in some pilot studies. We have discovered some new challenges, because how much ever gyan we have, the reality comes out only when we do it practically. And we are on the way, and we believe that next year we will demonstrate a completely 100% sustainable loop using green electricity with green transportation and leveraging the whole digitization piece, which is, of course, will include AI by default. So that's the perception at this stage. Thank you.
Mr. Pillai, tied up to what both of them said, there's a term called greenwashing. And you're, of course, somebody who is advising companies also in terms of how they can achieve their ESG goals. How do you think companies are able to, in your experience, strike a balance between profitability and sustainability?
See, sustainability, if you see sustainability as a separate box and you want to do it as, an activity, then, it is a struggle to do that. But if you include that into your business as usual operations, if you bring, the risk assessment of sustainability as part of our overall sustainability of the business, then it is not such a difficult aspect. I think Mr. Sethi has already mentioned that, if you save on reducing waste, if you save on energy efficiency, if you save on water consumption, you are not going to make loss. You are definitely going to make profit. But these are not short-term things. Initially there is a capital expense, capex upfront. You have to invest to get into sustainability, whether you have to move to renewables or to any other greener mode, you have to invest. But if you are looking at your business in a longer term, and as we were discussing, sustainability like digitization, it is going to happen. And everything that is going around us, if you look at the global pressure, the consumer market, the investment market, everybody is going to make you, adapt to ESG requirement. The faster you adapt it, the better you are aligned for the future. So when you are thinking of your business, you have to think long term. And in long term, you will find that renewables are definitely part of your business. Recycling is definitely part of your business. Having good social inclusion in your system is part of the business. So, whenever I advise, I will always ask them to look for, longer term, and all the investment that you are putting is actually going to come back in good profits only.
Right. In fact, we just have time for some closing comments. To Mr. Sethi first, how big is the role of authentic ESG practices, according to you? I mean, from Pernod Ricard India's experience.
It's very important. You need to be very clear and transparent, both in setting the initiatives that we have set out. So all our objectives, which are as per the ESG, they're all in the public domain. They are as per the SDG. They've been reported in terms of what we want to achieve. So we are very vocal in communicating what we want to achieve. And then the outcomes of that, right? So we need to be as transparent how we are tracking against them. The second part is also around, I would say, is the engagement of our stakeholders. That's equally important, especially coming to the customers, the consumers. Some of the initiatives like One for the Planet that we undertook, which was removing the monocartons out of our products, which was a bold move. Huge impact on sustainability, landfill elimination, which required a lot of advocacy and transparency with the end user, which was the consumer customer. It's a lot of engagement. And we were very upfront and transparent in terms of why we are doing this. And we were surprised the amount of support that we got, not only from the regulators, but also from the customers and consumers in terms of they willing to do that, and in fact, showcasing when they were doing it that they were actually removing an adjacent carton and putting it into the bin for recycling. So I think transparent reporting, being very clear, and then also driving the alignment with the business objectives. So in Pernod Ricard, ESG objectives are part of the business objectives. So there's a cascade of ESG goals which happens till from the top of the board to down to the front line. So that's another proof that it is as open and transparent as it can be.
Right. We have very less time, but Mr. Wajid, I would want your point of view on this as well, briefly, if you can.
Yeah, unlike Gagan, who has to sort of push together business and sustainability objectives, we have a luxury. Sustainability is our business. And we are trying to align the profit with the sustainability, not the other way around.
The other way around,
So that's, we have the luxury of doing that. So hopefully we'll do a good job.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that very engaging first session that we had on day 2 of NDTV World Summit. Thank you so much. We'll have to wind up this conversation, unfortunately,
you.
right now. But thank you all, gentlemen, for this talk.